Alright, my name is Michelle, and the claim that I'm refuting is that global warming is caused by humans. My opponent's secondary claims are that Earth is heating up in different ways, and also that human activity is causing the heat. Her first claim is that the heating of the Earth is caused by humans because there are different climate variations worldwide and sea levels have risen. But she only supports this by saying that different regions have had warmer weather over the past few decades. However, there's no evidence provided to back this up, and it is rather vague as to which are the affected regions, and it doesn't necessarily prove how humans have directly caused this. She also claimed that during the 20th century, sea levels rose an average of 7 inches after 2,000 years of little change, but there's no evidence that directly shows how this would be caused by humans. They just stated that the sea levels have risen 7 inches. So these claims don't support the notion that human activity has produced the imbalance, and there isn't a series of inferences that advance this claim. My counter claim to this is that according to the Senator James Inhofe, chairman of the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works, the 1 degree Fahrenheit rise coincided with the greatest advancement of living standards, life expectancy, food production, and human health in the history of our planet. So it's hard to argue that the global warming we experienced in the 20th century was somehow negative or part of a catastrophic trend. Her secondary claim is that human activity is causing the heat because humans cause different sources of greenhouse gases, and the primary way that this happens is by burning of fossil fuels. But through use of transportation such as cars, buses, airplanes, but she fails to show how any data or statistics to back it up. Also claims that farmers cause different sources of greenhouse gases when they need to cut down trees to grow more crops by means of deforestation, but this example is insufficient because there is no statistics or reliable information to show how largely farmers in particular have contributed to global warming. She also mentioned that Earth one day won't be able to repair itself, but there's no data provided to advance this claim, so it could just be taken as an opinion. She does talk about how some human contribution to global warming, but she doesn't mention how any of this is traceable to a significant change in global temperature. My counterclaim to this is that there's been a warm period on Earth even before any human industrial activity could have come about. According to the National Academy of Sciences, they reported and reaffirmed the existence of the medieval warm period, which lasted from about 900 AD to 1300 AD. This warming period occurred long before the invention of the SUV or human industrial activity, so there must be other major factors that have impacted the Earth's climate to heat up. Also, according to the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works, during the 1940s, just as man-made CO2 emissions rose sharply, the temperatures began to decline and get cooler, and this lasted until the 1970s. It shows that in the past, humans have sharply increased CO2 emissions, but it didn't directly result in the heating of the Earth. In conclusion, my opponent claims that the Earth is heating up in different ways and that human activity is causing the heat. However, these claims don't support the notion that human activity has produced an imbalance, and there isn't a series of inferences that advance this claim. And while she does talk about some human contribution, she doesn't mention how any of this is traceable to a significant change in global temperature. And as stated earlier, in the past there's been a warm period, but it wasn't proven to be directly caused by humans.
No, just you. You're on your own.
All right, I think that you've got a lot of good general presses on some of the arguments here, especially on the advocate's lack of evidence and especially trying to explain the lack of relationship between some of the places where evidence is provided and the claim that is being presented by the advocate. And you usually explain them adequately. The biggest problem that I have with the presentation is that your presentation is not very forceful. You need to speak up a little bit. The ideas, I think, are clear, but they would be clearer if you would give a little bit more emphasis and try and summarize and explain them to us instead of just go through them. You just basically mow through the challenges. You've written out your responses. You're reading your essay in response. And instead of talking to the audience and making clear what the problems are, you, like I said, you're just presenting the responses. I think they're pretty good responses most of the time, so I think you're doing a nice job on that. And in a couple of places, you also have some good counterclaims. For instance, you've got the argument about how there's been increased productivity and benefits, even though the climate has changed, and so that doesn't necessarily appear to be harmful. And then you've got an example that suggests that there are obviously substantial other influences that are not human-based that produce changes in the climate, and I thought that that was a good counterclaim on that particular point. I thought you had a really good summary. But you need to work a lot more on the delivery issues.
Oh, I just want to